My name is Tamala Lopez. I'm 34 years old. And for most of my life, my family treated me like a cautionary tale. Not the tragic kind, just the quiet disappointment. The daughter who never quite figured things out. The one who didn't marry early, didn't post vacation photos, didn't upgrade her car or her life in a way that translated well on Facebook. While everyone else had something loud to point at, I had silence, so they filled it in for me. I let them. I drove the same faded 2008 Corolla. I didn't correct assumptions. I didn't volunteer updates. I learned early that invisibility was safer than explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. Sunday dinners at my parents' house happened once a month, like clockwork. Same heavy dining table, same pot roast, same overlapping conversations that never paused long enough for anything real to land. I pulled into the driveway just as my younger brother Tyler revved his truck, twice. He'd wrapped it again. Matte black, neon accents, LED lights glowing under the chassis like a stage spotlight. He always needed an entrance. When he finally cut the engine, a few relatives stepped outside to admire it like it was a new family member. I parked behind him, grabbed the plastic grocery store pie I'd bought on the way, and went in through the side door. No one noticed. Inside, the house was already full. Cousins, aunts, uncles, the usual cast. I set the pie down next to three others, unlabeled and interchangeable. My mom passed me without really looking. "Hi, Mom." She nodded absently. "Table's almost ready." That was it. I moved toward the dining room and passed my cousin Mark, already holding court. Mark was 29, slick hair, loud laugh, a new job every year and a half. He thrived on attention like it was oxygen. "So yeah," he was saying, leaning back in his chair. "It's this tech firm called Orion. Super elite. Early stage, but exploding. I'm on the growth team. Equity options, catered meals, rooftop bar. You know how it is." My dad leaned forward, impressed. "Downtown, right? Near the Chase Tower?" "All glass," Mark said, grinning. "Security's insane. You practically need your face scan to get inside." A few approving murmurs floated around the table. I pulled out my chair. That's when Tyler glanced up from his phone, smirked, and said, "Still delivering packages live, Tam?" A couple people chuckled. I smiled. Calm. Automatic. The kind of smile you learn when reacting only makes it worse. Mark kept going, soaking it in. "They're building something huge. I can't even talk about most of it." I unfolded my napkin. "Oh," I said quietly, without looking at anyone. "That's mine." The silence was immediate. Forks froze midair. Someone inhaled like they were about to laugh and didn't. Even the noise from the kitchen seemed to disappear. Mark blinked. "Wait, what?" My dad leaned closer, squinting. "You're joking, right?" I didn't explain. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clarify. I just let the sentence sit there. I had built Orion 5 years earlier from my apartment while freelancing at night and eating canned soup. I hired my first engineer with a small tax refund and a 3-month contract I barely qualified for. Now we had a downtown office, multiple teams, and a valuation I avoided thinking about too long. Mark, it turned out, had been hired 2 weeks earlier by one of my department leads. I hadn't even known. They stared at me like they were trying to reconcile two versions of the same person, the quiet woman with the old car and the one signing paychecks. The questions came slowly. "How big is it? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?" I kept my answers short. My mom's tone softened. My dad nodded more than he spoke. Tyler stopped smirking altogether. And that's when I felt it. The shift. Not celebration. Not pride. Attention. Careful attention. They didn't know it yet, but that dinner was the beginning of something they would regret. And something I would too. The change didn't happen all at once. It started quietly, the way things always do in my family. Soft enough that you could convince yourself it was nothing. A tone shift. A pause before a joke that normally landed without thinking. People choosing their words around me, like they were suddenly afraid of stepping on something fragile. The morning after that dinner, my mom texted me first. "Hope you got home safe, Tam. Last night was nice. We should catch up sometime. Just us." I stared at the message longer than I should have. My mother and I didn't catch up. Not really. Our conversations were usually logistical, what time dinner started, whether I could bring napkins, reminders about Tyler's birthday. She hadn't asked to spend time alone with me in years. I typed back sure before I could overthink it. That afternoon, my dad called. He sounded thoughtful, reflective, like he'd been sitting with something. "I just want you to know I'm proud of you," he said. "I always knew you were doing something important. You've always been driven. That wasn't true. He'd never said anything like that before, but I thanked him anyway, hung up feeling strangely warm. By the end of the week, there were messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months, questions that sounded casual but weren't, compliments that felt rehearsed. Even Mark emailed me. It was a long message full of buzzwords and spelling errors, something about synergy and scaling and a business idea he wanted to run by me. I didn't reply. Tyler texted next. Been thinking about starting something of my own, he wrote. Would love your advice. Proud of you, sis. I read that line twice. He'd never said those words to me in my adult life. 2 weeks later, my mom invited me over for dinner again. Same table, same dishes, same people. Different energy. My dad pulled out my chair. My mom had made my favorite dish, the one she used to cook when I was in college, before everything else got louder and I faded into the background. Tyler actually waited until I finished a sentence before speaking. They asked questions, real ones. How big was Orion? How long had it been profitable? Was it stressful running something like that? I answered carefully, vaguely. I didn't want to brag. I didn't want to scare them. I didn't want to ruin whatever this was. And I'll admit it, I liked it. I'd spent years being invisible in that house. Years of being talked over, teased, forgotten. So when they finally looked at me like I mattered, like I was someone worth listening to, it felt intoxicating. That night, after dessert, my dad mentioned how hard the past year had been. Car repairs, hospital bills, the roof that kept leaking no matter how many times they patched it. He wasn't asking, just talking. Something in me shifted before I could stop it. I could help, I said. The words came out easily, too easily. I offered to take care of the cars. My mom's barely ran anymore, and my dad's truck sounded like it was pleading for mercy every time he started it. They protested for about 2 minutes. Then my mom asked what color she could get. The next week, I wired the payments and handled the paperwork myself. 2 modest, reliable cars, registered under my company. It made sense financially. A tax write-off. Practical. When I handed them the keys, my mom cried. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. My dad kept shaking his head, saying he couldn't believe how selfless I was, how proud he felt, how lucky they were to have me. I went home that night smiling. For the first time in years, I felt like their daughter again. What I didn't realize then was that something permanent had shifted. Not in me, in them. A few weeks later, my mom texted asking if I could help with groceries, just a little, until the next paycheck. My dad wondered if I had connections who could speed up his business license renewal. Tyler mentioned a sure thing investment that just needed a small boost. I told myself it was fine. I could afford it. What I didn't understand yet was that pride had already started sounding like interest, and I had just taught them how to ask. At first, it still felt like helping. Small things, reasonable things, things any successful daughter would do if she could. $200 for a vet bill, gas money when my dad's truck broke down again, groceries when my mom said prices had gotten ridiculous lately. None of it felt heavy on its own. I never kept track. I didn't want to. That was the first sign I should have paid attention to. The requests stopped sounding like favors and started sounding like updates. My mom didn't ask if I could help anymore. She just mentioned problems and waited. Photos followed. Screenshots. Links already opened to the exact model she wanted. The fridge was leaking 1 week. She sent a picture of a Home Depot flyer, the appliance circled in red. When I asked if they'd picked one out already, she replied in 10 seconds with the model number. It was already in her cart. I bought it. My dad called one morning while I was in the middle of a meeting. Left a voicemail saying they were behind on property taxes. Not a crisis, he said. Just bad timing. I wired the money before he finished the second sentence. He called me a lifesaver. That word stuck with me longer than it should have. A month later, Tyler asked for $5,000. Low risk, guaranteed profit, he said. I just need a small push. I asked one question. He answered with another. Don't you trust your own brother? I sent the money that afternoon. No one ever asked twice. They didn't need to. They learned how to phrase things so it didn't sound like pressure. It sounded like inclusion. Like I was finally part of the inner circle. My mom started asking my opinion on things she'd never cared about before. Paint colors, vacation plans, phone carriers. But underneath every conversation, there was always something unresolved, something expensive. My dad talked more about retirement, about how costly it was just to stay afloat. He never asked directly, just sighed in that tired voice that made me feel guilty for doing well. And I believed him. They started joking that I was the family CFO. My mom said it once at a barbecue. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It didn't hit me until later that no one ever asked how I was. Not once. This was what success looked like, I told myself. Not just office space and big numbers, but being able to take care of people. I wasn't just successful. I was useful. And that part of me, the part that had never been anyone's favorite, soaked it up. Before all this, I was background noise. The one who babysat for free. The one who drove Tyler home from parties. The one who helped plan birthdays but never had her own remembered. Now my calls were answered on the first ring. Now my dad saved me a seat at the table. Now my mom smiled at me like she was proud. I told myself that was love. I didn't realize it was a transaction. Not yet. That realization would take someone who had nothing to gain from me, someone who didn't need my money or my silence, to finally say out loud what I couldn't admit to myself. And once they did, I would never see my family the same way again. It started like nothing. A quiet Tuesday. I was alone in my apartment, eating leftovers straight from the container, reviewing licensing contracts on my laptop. I could have upgraded by then. Bigger place, better view. But I liked it here. It felt like mine. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. "Tamala?" a woman asked. "Yes." "It's Aunt Camille." We hadn't spoken one-on-one in years. She was my mom's older sister, the quiet one at family gatherings, the one who watched more than she spoke. I used to think she didn't like people. Now I think she just saw through them faster than most. She didn't make small talk. "Are you free for coffee?" she asked. I said yes. At the cafe, she was already there. Black coffee, half gone. She didn't smile when she saw me. She didn't ask how I was. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "It's time someone told you what your parents are doing." I tried to laugh it off. "I'm not struggling, Camille." She didn't blink. "No, you're not. But they're taking advantage of you. And no one else will tell you because they all benefit from your silence." The words hit harder than I expected. Then she said it. "Your mom told me you paid off most of their mortgage." I hadn't, not fully, but close enough that the distinction didn't matter. "She talked about it like it was your responsibility," Camille continued. "Like this was always the plan." My stomach dropped. "And Tyler's opening a bar downtown," she added. I frowned. "He mentioned something. I didn't invest." "That's not what he's telling people," Camille said gently. "He's saying you're one of the investors." Everything clicked. Every loan, every favor, every joke. They weren't proud of me. They were dependent on me. And dependency, I was suddenly realizing, wasn't love. That night I went home and checked everything. Transfers, wires, payments. 6 months, then a year. The total made my chest tighten. $143,000. And I could count the genuine thank yous on one hand. The next morning, my mom texted, "Can you send $600? We want a patio heater before it gets cold." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app. I canceled the automatic utility payments, froze the family credit cards, called the dealership to begin the process of reclaiming the cars. I told myself they'd understand. They didn't. The first call came from my mom. Her voice was sharp, already defensive. "What happened to the payments? We got late notices." "I'm not covering them anymore," I said. My voice surprised me. Steady, calm. "It's not my responsibility." There was a pause, then a short, humorless laugh. "So this is it," she said. "You think you're better than us now?" She hung up. My dad called next. "You've made your point," he said. "You're successful. You have money. But cutting us off like this? That's how you repay us?" "I've already helped," I said. "More than I ever should have." Silence. Then he said the words I didn't know I'd been bracing for my whole life. "You've always been selfish, Tamala, even when you were a kid." And he hung up. Tyler texted a few minutes later. "You're serious about taking the cars back? Wow." An hour after that, he posted a photo online. Funny how some people forget where they came from. Half the family liked it. Someone commented that they hoped I was okay, followed by, "But taking back gifts isn't a good look." Gifts. That's what they called it. My silence and generosity had become an unspoken contract. And the moment I broke it, I became the villain. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed every forced thank you. Every laugh that only came when I paid. Not once had anyone asked how I was. I skipped the next family dinner. My mom texted, "We made your favorite." Then, "You could have come." Then, "I guess you're too important now." What I felt wasn't grief, it was relief. For the first time in years, no one was asking me for anything. I sat alone in my apartment. Same couch, same mugs, same quiet. And for the first time, the silence felt like peace.